Hello and welcome to the Scatterable channel, and today I'm going to show you how to build a PC completely from start to finish, step by step. This is part 2 of a 5-part video series showing you how to build a PC completely, and today I'm going to show you the actual building process. Part 1 covered all the parts you'll need to build a PC and how to choose them. Part 3 is going to cover how to install Windows. Part 4 is going to cover how to install drivers. Part 5 is a bunch of miscellaneous stuff, but this is the important one. This is showing you how to put together everything inside of a PC case and then turning it on. Whether you're making an Intel or an AMD-based gaming PC with an NVIDIA graphics card, an AMD graphics card, or even an Intel graphics card, I'm gonna do my best in covering all the different building scenarios you may run into when building your first gaming PC. That said, I want to give a thank you to Corsair for sending over a bunch of different components showing you different ways on how to build a PC. And as usual, if you actually want to build this beginner-friendly PC, I've got it linked in a PCbuilds.gg link in the description below, which nails down the lowest prices possible for all of these components that I use in this build if you want to get this PC for yourself and build it at the cheapest option. So with all that said, I'm gonna go ahead and clear off the desk and show you how to start building your first gaming PC. So the first thing I like to think of when I build a PC is I'm gonna go ahead and start setting the stage for the motherboard, processor, RAM, and the SSD. So basically the heart of our gaming PC. So for the moment, I'm gonna put the case away because we won't be needing that. I'll go ahead and pull up the motherboard, the SSD we're gonna choose in this PC build guide, the RAM kit we're gonna go with for this PC build guide, and finally our CPU of choice. But for the power supply, we can go ahead and put this away. For any miscellaneous case fans you might be using, I'll go ahead and also put this away. Then for the coolers, you may actually wanna have this on hand because you'll be dealing with this soon, but again, I'll be putting this off to the side. Now I wanna reiterate again that if you're confused as to what parts to choose for a gaming PC, please watch part 1. That covers how to choose the parts for a gaming PC, what's compatible with what. Do know that this build guide is going to try to cover both Intel and AMD, which, spoiler alert, build the exact same way. So don't worry. Building a PC, it's not that complicated. I'd say it's harder to choose the parts for a gaming PC than it is actually building it. So all you need to build a gaming PC are just 3 things. A standard Phillips head screwdriver, so something like this is perfectly fine. I've got this fancy screwdriver here from lttstore.com that has a bunch of these different bits, but I'm mostly using the standard Phillips head right here, which can also be found in just a standard screwdriver. Now, in certain cases, for some motherboards, you may need a slightly smaller screwdriver. So something like a Phillips head 1 screwdriver, this is a little bit smaller than a standard Phillips head screwdriver. This may be used for the SSD on your motherboard, but you can usually get away with, again, using a regular Phillips head. Don't worry about it. Then, pair of scissors, of course, to cut things. And I'll use this as an illustration, but if you don't have a clean workspace, you might just want to grab a glass or a cup that you can use just to put in all of your spare screws and stuff that you'll accumulate as you start building your PC. I won't need to because I've got a clean workspace right here. And then finally, a Windows bootable media device. Now, part 3 of this tutorial series will show you how to create one of these for free, and you're gonna mess with this when you finish building your PC, but that's all you need. So for how to build your first PC, what I like to do first is go ahead and start installing stuff onto the motherboard. So for this build guide, we're gonna be building an AMD-based gaming PC, as that's the most popular option right now for CPUs. It's also one of the best performing and best value, so that's why we're going with AMD. But again, if you wanted to go with Intel, you just need a compatible motherboard with an Intel processor, and both Intel and AMD CPUs install pretty much the exact same way. But for this tutorial, I'm going with this B850 motherboard here from Asus. This is their Tough Gaming Edition. There's no specific reason why I really chose this motherboard. You can go with an X870, B850, B650, X670, A620, B840. You can really go with whatever you want. And if you're curious about all those chipsets that I just discussed, again, part 1 goes over all the different chipsets for different motherboards and different CPU brands, but really you don't have to overcomplicate it. The most important things when it comes to your motherboard choice for your gaming PC is the size. And this is ATX, which is the standard for pretty much all PC builds. So as long as your motherboard fits your case, that's really the only major compatibility hurdle you gotta worry about. Otherwise, if you look inside your motherboard box, you're gonna find a manual, and a lot of first-time builders skip over this. If there's any sort of pamphlet that comes inside your motherboard box, like what I did here for this Asus motherboard, absolutely grab one of these. Now, nowadays, this won't include the entire manual. As you can see, there's a QR code here that is provided by the motherboard manual that'll actually link to the full manual that shows all the individual plugs for this motherboard, because nowadays, motherboard manufacturers want to save on money for including their full manual, and instead will just give you this. But what I like about this here from Asus is that it gives you a map of the motherboard. So it shows where certain individual connectors will go on the motherboard itself, and that's pretty handy. So have your manual on to the side, and a few other things you might find in here are a SATA cable. This is for, say, a hard drive or an optical disk drive if you have something as old as that. But 9 times out of 10, you aren't gonna be messing with one of these, so we'll put it off for later. Because for this build guide, this is our SSD. It's gonna go straight onto the motherboard. No need to use one of these cables. And then you may find some additional small screws or whatever this is. This is actually rubber for our M.2 SSD, but we probably won't have to worry about that. So with our motherboard sorted, now let's go ahead and unbox our CPU, which again, for this build guide, I'm going with AMD. Again, if you wanna go with Intel, it's gonna install the exact same way as an AMD CPU. But if you are choosing an AMD CPU, it's gonna come in one of these two kind of boxes, a smaller one and a bigger one. So for a smaller one, as you can see, this is just going to come with the CPU, whereas with one of these bigger ones, it'll come with its own included cooler. So once again, visit part 1 if you're confused as to what kind of box you'll receive when you order your AMD CPU. I cover that in depth in that video, but don't worry too much about it. All you gotta do is just open up your box, pull out your CPU, unbox it. Pretty easy and straightforward. However, for this build guide, I've got a special CPU actually. This is the most popular budget gaming CPU on the market, and it's the one that I recommend a ton, and that is the Ryzen 5 7500F. I ordered one of these from AliExpress. It shipped over from China here to the United States. It should be available worldwide, and this is one of the best budget gaming CPUs on the market. There's a reason why I go with it a bunch in my PC build guides, because it provides the best price to performance for a Ryzen-based gaming PC, and it really won't bottleneck anything above, say, a 4070 Ti, 5070 Ti, Radeon RX 9070 XT. It's not gonna bottleneck much unless you go with a crazy graphics card, which probably isn't gonna be your first gaming PC. So I'm gonna go ahead and unlatch the CPU here, but there's 2 important things I wanna show you here on the processor. Right here is the name of your CPU, just to make sure you got the right one, but more importantly, if we flip here to the back side of the CPU, you're gonna find this golden triangle here on the top right of the processor from this angle, or top left from this side. This is what's gonna help you orient your CPU in the right direction when you place it into the motherboard socket, so please keep in mind of this triangle. And then here on the motherboard, you'll see there's also another triangle thing here found on the plastic shroud that's gonna go above the CPU. As you can kind of see, these 2 triangles are more or less going to line up together, kind of like this. So the Ryzen name is readable, and it isn't upside down or anything like that. But anyways, to go ahead and remove this, all we're gonna do is we're gonna press down this latch, unhook it from this, pull that out, pull this out, and here we can see the CPU socket now in full view. And if you needed an extra reminder, there's also an additional triangle here on the inside of the CPU socket, once again reminding you the orientation for that Ryzen CPU. So we've got multiple triangles here at our disposal to help line up the CPU correctly. So once again, there's one right there, there's one right there. We're gonna line the two up. And as far as dropping this in, it's actually pretty simple. I just like to kind of lay it here just above the pins. It's basically gonna go in. So I'm just gonna go ahead and gently drop it. It should just nicely fit into place. And one thing I like to do is to make sure that it's all the way in there, I give it a little jiggle. And honestly, I have never run into a situation where I drop this in and any pins bent. Unless you are really dramatic with it. With that height that I just had it at, about yay height from right here, it's not gonna bend any pins. So yeah, just drop it in, give it a little jiggle, that's gonna go in. So now push back down this shield right here from the IHS. Then we're gonna pull back down this lever. This plastic piece should pop off, that is fine. We'll go ahead and remove this. And this is what the CPU should look like inside the socket. It's legible, it isn't upside down or to the side or anything like that. This is surprisingly probably the easiest part in building a PC and one of the most fun. Now from here on out, you have a few options. If you're working with a stock CPU cooler that came with your Ryzen CPU, like in a bigger box like this, and you decide to install that, I will go ahead and do that right now. I have footage here on screen showing you how to do that. It's really simple. You just go ahead and remove the two black plastic brackets that are surrounding the CPU socket. Then you go ahead and take that CPU cooler, line it up with the 4 holes, have the AMD logo facing away from the RAM, and then just go ahead and start screwing that in. And reminder, thermal paste is already pre-applied on those kind of coolers, so no need to get your own. And as far as Intel CPUs, pretty much the exact same installation process. Line up the triangles, gently drop in the CPU, pull down the IHS shield, hook underneath that latch, and it installs the same way as an AMD cooler. And stock coolers for Intel CPUs also install fairly straightforward as well. So at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and start working on the RAM and the SSD for this PC build guide. So I'm gonna grab the scissors and I'm gonna go ahead and open up the RAM. Now for this build guide, I went a little crazy for a reason. I guess not really for a good reason, but I've got this dual kit of RAM here from Corsair. This is actually a very extreme option. This is a 2 by 48 gigabyte kit of RAM. I don't expect you guys to have this. I expect you guys to have a more traditional kit, like a 2 by 16 kit of RAM that totals up to 32 gigabytes. This is more standard, but as long as it's DDR5, you're in the clear. For all modern Ryzen and Intel CPUs, all of them use DDR5 RAM, so no worries on RAM compatibility. Now, if you're wondering about the speed and cache latency, once again, visit part 1 of this series where I go into the different types of RAM kits, their different speeds, what's recommended for Intel and Ryzen CPUs, but more or less, you really can't go wrong. Even if you choose the wrong kit of RAM, it's still gonna boot up and it's still gonna run in your PC. It just may not run at its full advertised speed because you could get RAM that's a bit too fast for your CPU and motherboard. But that isn't the case with this. And once again, whatever I've got linked in that PCbuilds.gg link is the best and most compatible parts for this beginner-friendly PC build if you want to get the exact parts that I use from this PC build guide in your hands to build this yourself. So we're gonna set the RAM off to the side, but now let's go ahead and talk about the SSD. So there's different types of SSDs out there. Again, if you want the differences on PCI Gen 5.0 versus 4.0 and so on and so forth, visit part 1. I talk about SSDs more in depth there. But I've gone with this Corsair MP600 Elite 4.0 M.2 SSD. This is a standard entry-level kit of SSD. It's not like your choice of SSD is gonna affect your frame rate or anything like that. And game loading times aren't honestly gonna be affected by it too much because most SSDs nowadays are really fast. So I'll have that off to the side and now go ahead and install both on the motherboard. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and start dealing with tools and where to put in what on the motherboard. So first thing I like to do here is once again, remind myself I have a motherboard manual. here's where I can find where to put what on the motherboard. So for the RAM, this is going to be going to the right of the CPU socket. And then for our M.2 SSD, we've actually got a few slots we can put it in. We can put it in these two slots down below. But for this tutorial, if you want to get the full speeds out of your SSD, it's always recommended to put it at the topmost slot, just above the topmost PCI Express slot where your graphics card would put in. So once you know where to do what, now we'll go ahead and start installing the RAM first. So if you're ever confused as to where to put certain RAM sticks on the motherboard, most motherboards nowadays have this inscribed right next to the RAM DIMMs, which shows you where to put what sticks first, which is really easy. So as you can see, this is going to go into slots A2 and B2. That is the first that you want to go ahead and put in. But if you're working with 4 sticks of RAM, as usual, you'd occupy all 4 slots on the motherboard. So once you know what slots you're going to go ahead and insert first, which is always going to be A2 and B2 for 2 sticks of RAM, like what we have in today's PC build guide, all you got to do is go ahead and flick out these tabs. So on certain motherboards, you'll have tabs here on the end on both sides, but just for this ASUS board, we have them on one side up here. If you observe your RAM stick, you'll see that the 2 connections here that'll go into the motherboard are varying sizes. One side is longer than the other, meaning this will only go in one way onto the motherboard. So if it isn't going in correctly the first time, flip it around. So for example, I'm gonna go ahead and try this direction. May or may not work. We'll see what happens. Okay. I'm giving it a firm press. I don't think it's gonna go in any further, so I'm gonna go ahead and flip this around. There we go. Now the logo here is visible to the right. I think this is gonna go in, so I'm gonna give it a firm press, and I'm gonna hear a very loud click when I do so. There we go. So that is 1 stick of RAM fully inserted, and we'll do that again. And it's important that you really insert these. I see people when they first install their RAM, they're too delicate with it, and it only leaves it like halfway inserted. You really gotta press it in there. And a way to check that is if you look here on the tabs, these have to be now flush with the RAM. They can't be out kind of halfway like this or something like that. And while we're here, make sure there's no miscellaneous pieces of plastic on the motherboard. I've got this little thing right here covering Tough Gaming, so I'll go ahead and peel that off because you don't want any of these plastic pieces on the motherboard when you first turn it on and you start generating heat from the graphics card and the CPU. That'd be a bit inconvenient to deal with because you don't want any melted plastic on your motherboard. Now we're on to the M.2 SSD. So again, if you're wondering where to put it in on the motherboard, you're welcome to check the manual, but 9 out of 10 times, you're gonna put this on the topmost slot, just above the PCI Express slot where your graphics card is gonna go into. Now, some M.2 SSDs come with their own built-in heat pads or heat sinks. I've removed those in the past because I prefer using the heat shield that comes with the motherboard. It also looks way cleaner and cooler, but again, with most SSDs, they'll just come bare like this. So as you can see right here, you're welcome to use your Phillips head screwdriver. You can totally do that with these smaller screws. You just have to be a little bit more delicate, like what I'm doing right here. So there you go, we've got 1 screw pretty much out for the M.2 heatsink, but like what I was saying earlier in the tutorial, there is this smaller Phillips head 1 screwdriver that you may want for these smaller screws here on the motherboard, like that. But as you can see, you can use both. You can use a Phillips head 1, you can use a regular Phillips head. At the end of the day, these are just screws. Now, one thing a lot of people miss whenever they install their M.2 SSDs for the first time is this contact patch right here that is pasted onto the underside of the M.2 heatsink. You need to remove this plastic piece right here, so it exposes that heat pad. So that way there's contact between the M.2 SSD and the heatsink for heat transfer. A lot of people forget that, and then they wonder why their SSDs are running super hot in their motherboard. But before we even do that, here's the actual mechanism that lets us install the M.2 SSD onto the motherboard. So this varies by motherboard manufacturer. At times, you'll just simply unscrew a screw and put in the M.2 SSD, but certain motherboards like this one are using a latching mechanism. So this is gonna work a little bit differently. Even for me, this is pretty new. So what I might do right now is I'm gonna go ahead and check out the motherboard manual for this Asus TUF motherboard, and it'll show me exactly how to install an M.2 SSD onto this slot, given this new locking mechanism I'm a little bit unfamiliar with. But if I had to guess, I'm gonna go ahead and insert the M.2 SSD like this. As you can see, there's this little divide here on the connector, and that's gonna line up a certain way with the connection, because then there's a slot right there for it. So this will only go in one way. Give it a click, as you can see right there. And I think how this is gonna go is I'm gonna press down on this tab, hook that underneath, press this back, and now it's locked in. Okay, that actually wasn't that bad. Again, this may need a screw right here, but for this motherboard, I just had to pull back on this tab. Now I'm gonna go ahead and reinsert here our M.2 heatsink. I'm just gonna simply screw this back in. And again, you can use a Phillips head 1 screwdriver like on here that is smaller, or if you wanna use the bigger one, then yeah, you can use a regular Phillips head. And that is our M.2 SSD installed. So now we've reached the point where we're basically ready to put in the motherboard into the PC case. However, depending on your choice of CPU cooler, this is where I'd go ahead and install an air CPU cooler. So there's multiple different types of CPU coolers out there. They're all explained in part 1 if you want to know which one to choose for your gaming PC. But if you have a stock AMD CPU cooler, that could already be installed here on the socket. What I'm going to show you right now is how to install an aftermarket air CPU cooler. And this is one here from Corsair. This is their A115. This is a high performance air CPU cooler. I like to knock these out before putting the motherboard into the PC case, because installing one of these inside the PC case is a little bit tricky. I like to have open space for it. But if you decide to go with a water cooler, I'd hold off. I'd wait until this is inside the PC case and we have our power supply installed. Then that's when I go ahead and install your water cooler if you're gonna go down this route. But don't worry, I'm gonna show you how to do both. Now, whether this is Corsair, Noctua, Fantex, Cooler Master, Thermalright, whatever kind of aftermarket CPU cooler brand you choose, they're basically all going to install the same on most AMD CPU coolers. However, if you decide to go with Intel, as I'll soon show you, if we open this up, there's the CPU block. Here are the 2 fans. If you open the main section of your CPU cooler, you will find a lot of bags with cables and stuff inside of it, but no matter what, they should be labeled. So if you're going with an Intel-based gaming PC and you decide to install, even if it's a water cooler, it'll always come with its own backplate, as you can see. One thing with Intel CPUs is that if you ever want to install an aftermarket CPU cooler, you will have to install this bracket before putting that in. However, with AMD and aftermarket CPU coolers, the cool thing with these is that the backplate is already on the motherboard itself, so you don't need to use any sort of Intel bracket or any bracket whatsoever with an AMD CPU cooler. But again, take a look at what's given inside your CPU cooler box. This right here is a baggie full of Intel stuff. This is a baggie full of AMD stuff. So again, choose the right one for your CPU based off what you eventually went with. But if you want to know exactly how to install any CPU cooler you're given, take a guess as to what you think I'm going to say, follow the manual. That'll show you how to install any aftermarket CPU cooler you want onto your CPU socket that you went with, whether it be Intel or AMD. Since we went with an AMD-based system, I'm going to go here where it says AMD retention and simply proceed forward and follow the manual. So to put one of these onto here, basically, for an air cooler, all you gotta do is go ahead and remove these 2 black plastic brackets. This is pretty straightforward. You're just gonna go ahead and unscrew these 2 screws. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that if you do install a water cooler, you may need one of these plastic brackets. But for air coolers, 9 out of 10 times, you're gonna want these uninstalled. That way, you are given the threads here for the backplate. Then if we look here for our baggies, we are given some standoff screws, and this is what we'll go ahead and install onto the backplates. Again, these will come with pretty much every CPU cooler you go with that is air cooler. So just gonna hand screw these in one by one, nothing too complicated. There we go, like that. So we have our standoffs installed, and this will let us put our mounting bracket surrounding the CPU. So now we've got our bracket on there. So the next thing I'm gonna do is take our thumb screws, if you can read right here, take these out. These are our thumb screws. I mean, you can also use a screwdriver to put these in. We're gonna go ahead and screw in these brackets for our air CPU cooler. There we go, that is fully inserted. And now it's time to actually go ahead and put on the CPU cooler block onto the CPU. So with a lot of these custom aftermarket air coolers, a lot of them will come with thermal paste pre-applied, what you can see right here. So if we were to take this off, we have this grid of thermal paste already pre-applied. But if you're curious to know how much thermal paste you need to actually put onto one of these CPUs, I'll go ahead and quickly demonstrate that to you. So if your contact plate here didn't come with thermal paste pre-applied and you would have to apply it manually, this is what it looked like. You take your thermal paste and you really actually probably need to put a little bit less than you think. Just make a little pea-sized dot like that. Perfect, just like that. And then you will take your CPU cooler block, squash that onto there, and then eventually start installing the CPU cooler block onto the brackets. But since we already have thermal paste pre-applied, we don't need this. So here, let's actually go ahead and show you how to install the CPU cooler block onto the CPU. I think I'll need to go ahead and actually remove one of these fans right here. That way we have access to the two screws right here that'll press onto the bracket. Here is the Corsair logo. I want that facing upright, so we're gonna insert this like this, I'm pretty sure. Or actually, let's see. Yeah, we gotta flip that around because this is going the other way. But as you can see, the two screws are gonna line up with the bracket right here. And we're gonna take our screwdriver and just start screwing this in. Now, what I like to do is like to screw in one side a little bit, just make sure it makes contact with the thread. Screw in the other side a little bit. That is, let's see, that's not fully on there. I gotta press down a little bit more. Or if it's not making contact, just unscrew the side you got in just by a little bit. And now this should be able to make contact. Oh yeah, now both ends are in. So I'll just go ahead, screw in one side a little bit, screw in the other side a little bit, and just repeat this back and forth. That way we put equal pressure onto the CPU as it spreads out the thermal paste. All right, this end is fully tightened. Let's go to the other end. That is fully tightened. Now the CPU cooler block is onto the CPU. So with the CPU block now installed onto the CPU, let's go ahead and quickly talk about fans and their direction. So most fans are gonna look like this. You'll have a side with the blades and a side with the bracket that is visible. And the side with the bracket means air is being pushed out in that direction. So if we were to look at the fan here like this with the blades on this side, airflow is gonna be going through like that. It's being pulled out through this direction. And this is mostly true, pretty much. There are some reverse fans, but we'll worry about that later. So we want this fan facing this way. So installing this onto this Corsair A115 is pretty straightforward. It's already gonna go in as there's a railing system right here. And we do have the cable for this fan right here. We'll mess with that later. But we're gonna go ahead and install this second fan to go along with it right here. But before we do that, there's one more thing I need to go ahead and install, and that is this additional fan clip right here. I'm gonna quickly put this onto the Corsair fan, install this just above the RAM, and then I'll meet back with you guys later. Okay, so once you have the CPU cooler basically all the way installed, whether you go with an aftermarket CPU cooler or the stock AMD or Intel CPU cooler, you're gonna be given some cables that are just gonna dangle off the actual fans. Those are gonna go inside where it says CPU opt and CPU fan. But for this tutorial, we're gonna put it into CPU fan because these are the fans that are obviously gonna cool off our CPU. Now, if you're using a stock AMD or Intel cooler, you're only gonna be given one cable, and you're just gonna plug that into where it says CPU fan on your motherboard. But for this tutorial, since we have two cables, if you're given an aftermarket cooler with multiple fans, you should be given one of these, which is a 2-to-1 fan header. So we're gonna go ahead and plug in both of these into this, as you can see. And then we're gonna take the end with both, and we're gonna put that into CPU fan. So whether you go with ASUS, MSI, Gigabyte, or ASRock motherboards, on the motherboard itself, you should see some text that reads CPU fan and CPU opt, or that could be CPU pump. For an air cooler, you're gonna wanna always put that into where it says CPU fan. So if you look at the two readings there on the motherboard, CPU fan is underneath CPU opt, or AKA CPU optional. So we have our double fan header plugged into where CPU fan is. So at this point, you're basically welcome to take this and put it inside your PC case, which we'll soon cover. However, for this build guide, I'm eventually gonna show you how to install a water cooler as well. So for the moment, I'm gonna go ahead and disassemble this really good looking Corsair A115 and make room for this eventually. So I'll go ahead and catch up with you guys in a little bit. All right, now, let's go ahead and start working with the case. So for this build guide, I'm going with the #1 best-selling PC case on Amazon, the Corsair 4000D, although this is the new frame variation, which comes with its own benefits from the original. So how I like to do these PC cases is that I like to open up the top first, and from the looks of it, there's this panel right here that I'm gonna go ahead and set off to the side, but here's the PC case. I've got it exposed right here. Push it down like that. I make sure these little handles that are inside the PC case box are flipped outwards. That way I can just pull this out, see the PC case for what it is, put this upright, remove these two styrofoam brackets. All right, and let's remove this plastic wrap. And there is our 4000D. Now, if you're wondering, there's different versions of the 4000D if you really wanted to get picky about it. There's the traditional 4000D frame that doesn't come with any fans, which is fine if you wanted to use your own fans with your own cooling configuration. Then there's the 4000D RS, which comes with some non-RGB fans. That's fine as well. But what we've got right here is the RS ARGB, which comes with 3 front ARGB fans. I like this because they're already pre-installed, they're already pre-cabled all together, and I'll just show you how to install that onto the motherboard. So that's good. But don't worry, because if you got your own set of fans, I'll also be showing you how to install that into a PC case. Spoiler alert, it's not that bad. So once you got your PC case out here on display, first thing I want you to do is remove the side panel here. Go ahead and put this thing off to the side somewhere. Oh, we got some tape. Let's go ahead and remove that. There we go. Put this to the side somewhere where you won't forget it, but more importantly, on a spot where it won't break, because you don't want that glass panel to fall down and shatter into a bunch of pieces. Ooh, and let's take a look here inside the case. What I'm also gonna do, so I'm gonna go ahead and unscrew this back panel right here. Remove that. Now we've got access to the front and the back of this PC case, which, ooh, this is actually a pretty nice looking case. Now with a lot of PC cases, when you open up the rear panel here, you'll find a plastic baggie full of screws and a manual detailing where goes where inside your PC case. But here on the 4000D frame, I think everything we need comes in this. So let's see, let's open this up. Ooh, okay, we are given traditional plastic baggie full of screws. If you were ever wondering, do I need to buy a certain set of screws for a PC build? No. All the screws that you need to build any PC are gonna come with the PC case of your choice. But what else are we given here? We're given this front panel splitter right here, which you don't need to worry about. And that's actually a good sign for this PC case. I'll talk about this later, but you don't need one of these. Looks like we're given some sort of additional mounting bracket for something we probably don't need. Ooh, this looks like it's a rubber tab, probably for something in here, I'm not too sure. Right here is a safety and compliance information pamphlet. Probably don't need to worry about that. But what is this? Okay, I see what this is. So this is the Corsair 4000D frame. So a lot of regular PC cases, they're gonna come with something like this for the fan bracket, whether it be on the front or the top. You'll have mounting here for 120mm fans, 140, or possibly even bigger than that. But what makes the 4000D frame unique, as you can see here in the footage, is that you can actually manually control the width of the fan spacing for whatever fans you want to use inside the 4000D. So if I recall, you can technically throw up to 200mm wide fans inside this PC case through the unique rail mounting system that's found in the 4000D. Anyways, that's just some stuff I'm going to geek out about, but yeah, this is a traditional fan mounting bracket. If we want to mount these fans traditionally, this is going to be the case for any other PC case you deal with. But with the 4000D, you'll see in the footage, it's honestly not going to be that much different. And this thing, I don't know what this is. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and stow all this stuff away because we don't need it other than this plastic baggie full of screws. Real quick though, just make sure you have everything out of the PC case. There's this little plastic covering right here for this bottom chamber guard, which we need to remove for airflow reasons. Put that back in. Or actually, we'll leave this out because why not? And pro tip, I like to use this as a trash can, as you can see. For anything that I unbox and don't need anymore, I just throw it in here in the case box. It's kind of nice. So for example, I'm just gonna throw that in there. Anyways, now with the PC case fully deconstructed, let's go ahead and put the motherboard inside the PC case. Okay, so let's go ahead and put the motherboard into the PC case. And the first thing I want you to do is to look at these things right here. These are motherboard standoffs, and this is what's gonna make contact between your motherboard right here and the actual PC case. This is quite important because we don't want anything else touching the backside of the motherboard other than these standoffs, or you could potentially short something when you turn on your PC. So with a standard ATX PC case like this, 9 out of 10 times, all the standoffs you need will already be pre-installed, but there are some cheaper cases out there that may have a few missing standoffs that you just have to install by hand, as I've run into in the past with certain cases. Or if you're working with a micro ATX PC case, you may have to also kind of move around certain standoffs. But with most ATX PC cases, all the standoffs should already be pre-installed. But just to double check, we are given 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 standoffs. And if we look here on the motherboard, those are gonna line up with these holes here on the motherboard where the standoffs are gonna go into. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 holes here on the motherboard. We have standoffs required for all the holes on this motherboard. So now let's go ahead and insert this into the case. But before we do so, I do want to make a note of these things here called IO shields. Now, a lot of motherboards nowadays have them already pre-installed onto the rear of the motherboard, like this one here. But certain cheaper motherboards will have them not installed in the first place, and you'll just have to put that plastic shield into the back of your PC case manually. It's not that bad. Here's a tutorial showing you on screen how to do that. You just simply want to press in all 4 corners of the IO shield and make sure the side with sticky bits is facing inside the PC case and the flat side is facing outwards. But once again, if you go with a more premium motherboard like this with the IO shield already on it, then that just simplifies things. So now we take this, drop it in. I like to go ahead and line up the IO shield with the rear of the PC case right here. That kind of helps me align this a little bit better. All right, so I'm looking inside the motherboard and I'm not quite aligned. Oh, there we go. There we go. Now I can see all the individual threads for each of the motherboard standoffs. And we have this middle standoff right here that already kind of doesn't necessarily have its own screw, but it's sticking out, which helps us align this motherboard. So now what I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm going to refer to the motherboard manual, as you can see here on screen for the 4000D frame. This will tell me what exact case screws to use for screwing in screws onto the motherboard, as from what we have from all these baggies of case screws right here. So if I look at the manual, it looks like I'm gonna be using these screws right here for the motherboard, these thinner screws that don't have that long of a thread. So I'm gonna take my scissors, cut this open, and I'm gonna take my Phillips head screwdriver, and one by one, I'm gonna go ahead and start screwing in one corner of the motherboard. But what's important is that you don't tighten it. I want you to do this for all screws. Just go ahead and insert them, but don't tighten them. And with this final screw, I'm gonna put into the motherboard here. I now have all 9 screws pre-inserted into the motherboard, but once again, not all of them are tightened. So now I'm gonna go ahead and tighten up this screw right here, do a crisscross pattern right here, go to this other screw on the other side of the motherboard, tighten this one up, go to the other quarter, tighten this up, and simply repeat this in a crisscross formation here across the motherboard. So I'll tighten that one up, I'll tighten this one up, I'll tighten this one up, and go ahead and knock out this one. That way we put equal pressure on all sides of the motherboard. That way we don't accidentally bend anything. Because graphics cards nowadays are getting quite big, so you gotta make sure that the motherboard is inserted into the PC case with equal pressure across all of the motherboard so it doesn't accidentally bend anything. And with that done, let's go ahead and move on to the next step, and that is inserting the power supply into the PC case. Okay, so we'll get to the power supply first, but I figured with the motherboard cleanly here in view, let's go ahead and actually install the front I/O cables with the PC case. And these are actually not that bad. So if we look here on the back side of the PC case, our front I/O cables, which are basically our power button, our two USBs, our USB Type-C, that is all found right here, and we need to plug this into the motherboard. Now, once again, if you don't know where it goes where, refer to the motherboard manual. This will show you where certain plugs will go in. And again, reference the full motherboard manual if you want more specifics. But no matter if you go with ASUS, Gigabyte, MSI, ASRock, or whatever else, all of the connectors are going to be found in roughly the same spots. So, for example, a blue USB 3.0 header, this one right here, it's going to be found in roughly the same spot as a Gigabyte motherboard, as the ASUS board we're using here. But anyways, go ahead and remove these. There's all of our front I/O cables now. Pull this out, and let's go ahead and cover each of these one by one. So this right here is the most important connector of the bunch. This is our front panel header. This is what controls the power button, the reset button, and anything else. And fortunately with this Corsair PC case, it is all connected into a singular connector, which is super convenient. Then here's another connector that looks similar to that. This is our HD audio connector. This is always going to go into the bottom left of our motherboard every single time. And this is what controls the onboard audio jacks that are found at the front of your PC case. Then this right here is a USB Type-C header. For USB Type-C connections, this is also going to go onto the motherboard. And like what I was talking about earlier, this is your USB 3.0 header, this big chunky guy right here. Additionally though, with this Corsair Frame 4000D case with the included ARGB fans in the front, we have these 3 ARGB fans that are already hooked up and daisy chained together and are being controlled by these 2 connectors right here. So let's go over what each of these are. This may look similar to what we've dealt with in the past, especially if you remember the CPU cooler. This right here is a fan header that controls all 3 of the pre-included case fans, and we'll put this into a chassis fan header onto the motherboard, or it'll say CHA underscore header or something like that. And then this right here is your ARGB connector that controls the RGB on the front fans, and this is a 3-pin. So you can see the 3 little silver things inside of the connector. This is also going to attach to the motherboard, and there's a certain connector for it. You really can't miss it, but I'll show you where to find each of these. So without further ado, we're gonna just put this into the motherboard. So let's go ahead and start plugging in those cables. So once again, here's our front panel connector. If you look here on the actual connector itself, you'll have exposed pins for all of these except for one that is blocked off. And this is gonna go down here on the bottom right of the motherboard. And again, no matter if it's ASUS, Gigabyte, MSI, ASRock, this is universally always going to go in the bottom right of the motherboard. And if you're confused as to which header to put it in, refer to the motherboard manual. It'll tell you where to put in that connector. But as you can see, this is only going to go in one way because of that blocked pin. So I'll bend this around, insert this like so, and that was really easy. Now here's our HD audio connector. And again, if you look at the actual connector, there is one blocked pin on here, meaning this is only go in one way, and there's only one connector for it on the motherboard. So if it isn't right, you'll know if it is or if it isn't. And once again, no matter if it's ASUS, Gigabyte, MSI, or ASRock, this is always gonna go in the bottom left of the motherboard, just like that. Now let's move up to here and cover our USB Type-C header. This is gonna go into this connector. You really can't miss it on the motherboard. The 2 are meant to go together, and as usual, this will only go in one way. There we go, make sure that's fully clicked into there. And look at that, right below it, we've got our USB 3.0 header right next to it. And the one thing I want you to note is that there is this little, I won't even want to say a dimple, but there's this little exposed part here on the connector. And this will just help you better align with the 3.0 header. As you can see, this little thing right here is gonna line up with this cutout for it on the actual connector itself, meaning, guess what? This will only go in one way. So bend this around, gently put it in there, just like that. And don't forget, here is the joint cables for the front ARGB fans. I'll show you where to plug in each of these. I like to plug these on the bottom of the motherboard because I like to reserve up here the CPU cooler if there's any RGB fans on the CPU cooler, or if it's a water cooler, the CPU fans that are gonna be here at the top of the case. I like to reserve this top right part of the motherboard for that. So down here is usually where I plug in any spare case fans, whether they be on the front, on the rear, or even at the bottom. So let's go ahead and first knock out this fan header right here. And this is gonna go into any fan header here found on the motherboard. Each of these say like CHA1 fan, CHA2 fan. It really doesn't matter which one you plug any of these into. I'll be annoying and I'll plug that one into the middle one just to prove that it doesn't matter. But what does matter here is your ARGB header connection. So this is a 3-pin, as you can see, and across the motherboard, you'll find these little 3-pin receivers for it. And this is actually the hardest part of building a PC, is inserting this dang connector in there because it doesn't want to go in. It's actually kind of difficult. I'm surprised. Yeah, this is the most difficult part of building a PC. It just doesn't want to go in. It's only going to go in a certain way, and you got to be super specific and picky with it. You have to look at it from like different angles. Is it going to go in? Oh my goodness, it finally went in. Okay. Oh, okay, there we go. That's literally that 3-pin 5-volt ARGB connector that controls the RGB from your fans is literally the most difficult part of building a PC. Sometimes it just never wants to go in. But finally, with all that front IO done, we can install the power supply. Now let's go ahead and install the power supply. And I've got 2 units here from Corsair to showcase the 2 different ways you can install these. So for the budget end or mainstream end, you've got these non-modular power supplies here. So if we were to open this up and just quickly show you guys, on the unit itself, all of the cables are pre-attached to the power supply. So everything you need is already on the power supply. No need to sort out your own cables or stuff like that. So this is, of course, the easiest way, but as a result, you'll have to mess with all the cables on the inside chamber here once you put all of your cables in. It's just additional cables you won't need at the end of the day, but I'll save this for later because for today's build guide, I'm gonna show you how to use a fully modular power supply. This one right here is the RM1000X Shift. This is actually a little bit different than your standard fully modular power supply because if we look at the unit itself and what makes it unique is that all of the connectors for the fully modular power supply here aren't found on the other side of the power cable connector. It's actually found on the side, which is pretty convenient actually. So you can read and see all of the individual connectors you'll need. Now, once again, I want to stress, if you're using a non-modular power supply, don't worry about this next step. All the connectors you'll need will literally come with the power supply. You can just skip right to where we go ahead and actually put it inside the PC case. But for you fully modular guys, or even semi-modular, this right here is all of the cables you gotta unbox and eventually plug in to the power supply. But one other important thing to note inside any power supply you choose, whether it be from Corsair or other brands, is that you're given a power supply cable. That is what you'll use to actually plug into a wall outlet into the back of the power supply. And then we're also given not just some zip ties, but these screws right here for the power supply. So if you're wondering, do I need case screws for the power supply? The answer is yes, and they already come inside the box for the power supply. Anyways, in regards to all of this right here, the good news is that you don't need all these cables. We'll only need a certain few. So this right here is the most important one. This is your motherboard power connector. This one is gonna go into the motherboard, obviously. And actually with each of these connectors, you can read and see what kind of connector you'll need. But the next most important one that you're probably gonna want is this right here, your CPU power cable. So this is a standard 8-pin connector, meaning there's 8 pins on the actual connector itself. That's pretty self-explanatory. And with most motherboards, you'll either need one of these, or in the case of our build, we are going to need 2 of them because we have 2 8-pin power connectors found on the motherboard for the CPU. Now, the next most common and other important cable you're probably going to need is some sort of PCIe power cable for your graphics card. Now, this is where it splits. So this right here is a 12-volt power cable. As you can see right here, it looks quite a bit different from a standard PCIe power cable. This is what you'll find most common in most NVIDIA graphics cards, whether it's a 5090, 5080, 5070 Ti, so on and so forth. This is just a singular power cable, and this is all you need for those graphics cards. But if you're working with AMD or Intel graphics cards, you're going to need these standard PCIe power cables that read PCIe on them, as you can see, and these will plug into the graphics card pretty easily. And again, doing either of these options for either NVIDIA or AMD or Intel are pretty much the same. Just gotta make sure you have the correct amount of cables. With NVIDIA, you're only going to need one. Both Intel or AMD, you could either need two or more. And then lastly, if you look at the rest of the connectors here, if you're old, you'll know what this is. You don't need it, don't worry about it. But what you might need is this right here. This here is a SATA power cable, which traditionally is used for hard drives and SATA SSDs, but sometimes this can also be used for onboard RGB controllers or for fan controllers, just to provide additional power for those extra accessories. Now, fortunately for our PC build, we won't need one of these as far as I know. We may need one for later, but the good thing with this Shift series power supply is since we'll be able to see all the connectors on the side of the PC case, if we're missing one, we'll just simply go ahead and plug it back in. So for this build guide right here, I'm gonna go ahead and show you how to insert the motherboard power cable, the two CPU power cables, and screw it. I'll show you how to do both for the PCIe power cable and the 12-volt power cable. So first, let's go ahead and install our motherboard power connector into the back of this fully modular power supply. So if we read right here, this is where it says motherboard. No matter what brand of power supply you go with, it should have markings on the unit telling you where to plug in what. So it looks like we're gonna plug one of the motherboard power connectors into here. Make sure it's fully inserted. You don't want it halfway inserted. You can't be nice to these. You gotta be firm. And then we're gonna plug this one right next to it, just like that. And make sure they're all the way in there. These things aren't gonna break. You just gotta make sure they're fully in there. Next, let's go ahead and plug in those CPU power cables, which if we look right here, we can see these PCIe/CPU connections where we're eventually gonna plug in one of these. It doesn't matter where you put these. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put one of these into here, firmly insert it. Guys, if these are not inserted all the way, you're gonna run into issues. And I'll go ahead and insert another one for the CPU right next to it. There we go. Now for installing an NVIDIA GPU, you're gonna plug this into where it says PCIe. So as you can see right here, we're given actually two slots right here. This can be used for the CPU as well, but just to separate them, I'll do this for the PCIe like that. But once again, doing it for AMD or Intel with these traditional PCIe power cables is gonna be in the exact same spot, in the exact same way. Now, before we put the power supply into the case, there's two things I want you to note. First of all, this switch right back here. So for the moment, just keep it on the 0. You're gonna eventually flick it to 1 when you're ready to turn on the PC for the first time. That just primes it. So when you press on the power button, it'll actually turn on the PC. But since we're still building the PC, we'll leave it here on the 0. But the second thing, make sure the fan side is facing down, because we want airflow to be coming through the bottom of the case, not necessarily from the top for this unit right here. So you're gonna take this, make room for it, bring it here around the back, get these cables out of the way, shimmy this in. There we go, just like that. Once again, don't forget you're given your plastic baggie of screws for the power supply. We'll go ahead and empty these. And if I go ahead and bend over all the way here, I'm gonna go ahead and use these thumb screws, I think, and screw in some of this. All right, I've got those thumb screws mostly inserted, but for pretty much any power supply, you're gonna take one of these screws, screw it into one corner, make sure that's in there, take another screw, go into the other corner right here where there's an open thread, screw that in, take another one, rinse and repeat. Oh wow, I think we've got yet another screw we can actually put in up here. And let's just make sure these two thumb screws are totally in. Man, that was easy. So with the power supply installed, just so we can knock it out of the way, let's go ahead and install the power cables from the power supply onto the motherboard and have a power cable on hand and ready for the graphics card. So first things first, I'm gonna go ahead and actually deal with the CPU power cables. These are gonna go up here, and I just wanna show you here on the rear of the 4000D, we've actually got some cable management holes that we can thread these through, but given time, I'm not gonna mess with those. I'll cable manage the PC later. I'm gonna go ahead and take these cables and thread them through here. So this cable here is now flush on the back of the PC case. I'm gonna bring this around. So here we've got our two CPU power cables. As you can see, there's this latch that comes with each connector, and that's gonna line up with this little notch here, found on the top of each power connection for the CPU. So we're gonna take one, flip it around, hook up the latch with the notch. So this will only go in one way, just like that. And then we'll rinse and repeat, plug that in, firm press, boom, easy. Now, once again, on the back side of the PC case, here's our big motherboard power connector. Let's go ahead and deal with this next. This guy, I'm gonna put through here for now, but it's gonna go around here somewhere. So let me see, where's the connector? It's gonna be up here. I'm gonna thread this around here, but again, don't forget, you've got some cool little strap downs right here for this connector just to make it a little cleaner. On the rear of the PC case, flip this around. And as you can see, there's a little theme right here. There is the latch. There's the notch where the connector is gonna go into. So we're gonna go ahead and bend this cable, bring it around. There we go, make sure that's fully inserted. All right, now for the GPU of choice, I like to go ahead and route the PCIe power cables through this opening here on the bottom of the case. It's gonna be the same for pretty much any PC case. And I just like to have this just hanging around, because we'll eventually plug in the graphics card. So now with our power supply cables ready for the graphics card and any coolers we might need, now let's go ahead and install the water cooler for this PC build. But remember, if you already have an aftermarket air cooler or the stock CPU cooler, you don't have to worry about this next step. I just recommend you mess with water coolers at the tail end of your PC build. That way, you can install your CPU power cables here and not have to worry about your AIO getting in the way of them. So let's go ahead and take care of that. Now let's go ahead and install our water cooler. So for this, I've intentionally chosen this iCUE Link Titan 240 RX RGB. So I will say with a lot of water coolers out there, they are traditional RGB or non-RGB coolers, but this one is an iCUE Link CPU cooler, which is something I wanted to showcase specifically in this build because it does something really unique that you won't find in a lot of other water coolers. Oh wow, look at that, the fans are already pre-installed. There you go, let's take this all off, and here is our CPU cooler. So what's really cool about these iCUE Link coolers is that the controls for the fans and the RGB are basically going to be controlled by a single cable. So if we actually look right here, pretty sure this is where the iCUE is going to come into play. Yep, there's our singular connector that's going to control the fans and the RGB in one go. Now, with most other water coolers out there that have RGB and fans on them, they'll be daisy chained already, like what you saw here in the front of the PC case from the footage you can see on screen. But this is just another way of doing it, a more premium way of making your PC just look a little bit more clean. But in here as well, I think it's the controller for iCUE. Oh no, this is an extension cable. Okay, we'll deal with this later. And there's four, okay. And we're given an additional USB 2.0 header that's gonna control the CPU temp found on this display right here as well. I'll leave this all right here. Your CPU cooler is probably gonna vary to this. If you choose something that's cheaper, it's not gonna be as complicated as this, but it'll install the exact same way as this. Once again, note right here, you're given two different types of backplates for AMD and for Intel. Once again, since we're going with AMD, we don't need to mess with this Intel one. And remember, the backplate for AMD is already pre-applied, although it looks like we're given a custom CPU bracket. We may have to install that. We'll see. We're given some screws right here. Let's see, is there anything else that we're missing? Oh, right here. This is just for the specific type of CPU cooler, but here is our iCUE Link block where we're gonna plug in our CPU cooler, our power, and a few other things. So that's why we have all these other cables right here. Now, if you don't know what to do with your CPU cooler, refer to the manual. Whether it's Corsair or another type of water cooler, I highly recommend you read the manual. especially for your specific type of CPU socket. That way you'll know exactly how to install one of these step by step. But more or less, you're basically gonna take one of these, bolt it onto the top of the PC case. So to prepare for that, I'm gonna go ahead and remove this. There we go. Whoop, yep. Now we have access to the top of the PC case, and I can actually show you that rail system I was talking about earlier. Ooh, and let's see. If you look here on the actual water cooler, it looks like the bracket is already pre-installed, although I think this is for Intel, so we may need to take this off. We probably will have to take this off. Let's see. Again, I don't quite know what to do. So once again, I'll refer to the manual that was provided by this CPU cooler just to see exactly what I need to do for an AMD CPU cooler. So I'll go ahead and meet up with you guys in a little bit. So right here, I've actually got the Intel mounting system for this AIO from Corsair. And to remove this, I'm just gonna go ahead and simply pull it off and replace it with the AMD bracket solution. I was wondering why this was included in the AMD box, not the AMD box, the AMD bag. And that's because these come apart and these will go onto the CPU. So just like the Intel one that was on there previously, I'm just gonna go ahead and slide this in like that. Slide in the other side. Yeah, pretty easily, just like that. And the other thing I want you to do now is, as you can see with this CPU cooler, we're gonna be screwing directly into the rear backplate on the motherboard. So if these haven't been taken off yet, I'm gonna go ahead, unscrew these. There you go, now we've got those two black plastic brackets off of the CPU cooler, exposing the threads for our block right here. But first, I think we need to go ahead and actually put this into the PC case. So I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of put that right there. As you can see, actually, here's the cool rail mounting system that Corsair was talking about earlier. So right here, this is their InfiniRail system. So this is set to 140, 160. We don't want that because we're working with a 120 millimeter radiator, or 240, which is technically two 120s. So I think all we gotta do to move this is unscrew this and unscrew this other side over here. There we go. And then we can go ahead and pull this to where it says 120. We'll screw this back in. And now we're almost there. This right here is our screws bag with all the screws we'll need. Fortunately, the fans for this water cooler were already pre-installed, so we don't have to worry about that. But it looks like Corsair goes the distance and includes the long screws that we use either way to install the fans onto the water cooler. But the fans that we want to use, not the fans, the screws that we want to use are these short and stubby ones. This is what we use to actually screw onto the actual case itself. You're also given some washers right here if you want to add some space, but I'm not going to mess with those because that'll just take up extra time. So to put this in, for the moment, it doesn't matter exactly where you put it, just as long as it's here on the top. I'm just gonna go ahead and thread in one screw so it makes contact and I don't have to one hand this. There we go. I'll let that hang. I'll get in another one right here. And remember, you can install, as you can see on this PC case, it can be a 360, it can be a 280. You've got a lot of radiator options with this PC case. I'm just doing 240 because it's the least expensive water cooling option there is. And to be frank, for most CPUs, 240 is fine. You only need 360 and any extreme options like that for like a 12 or 16 core CPU. That's gonna get pretty hot. All right, I am screwing in the screws for the water cooler. Almost there. All right, I've got all 8 of them in. I'm gonna tighten each of these. All right, and one thing I want you to observe is that here, we have thermal paste that is already pre-applied on our copper plate for the CPU cooler. Now, as I showed earlier during the Air CPU cooler section, if you don't have thermal paste pre-applied, that is where you want to go ahead and take your little thermal paste that came with your CPU cooler, put a pea-sized dot onto the CPU. For this guy right here, don't even have to worry about that. It's already pre-applied. So all we got to do really is just pull this around and screw it in like that. And you don't need to be super picky as to where the tubes are gonna go. As long as there's not a whole lot of tension pulling on them, you'll be all right. So I'm gonna go ahead and line this up with the 4 holes found here on the back plate. Actually, it may be easier to do this facing down. So as you can see, we've got all 4 screws here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just screw in a little bit on one end, go to the other end, screw it in a little bit, just make sure it makes contact with the thread, because just like the motherboard, let's make sure there's contact on this final screw. Let's see, that might be in all the way. Let's double check. See, yep, all 4 screws are screwed into the back plate. So like what I was saying earlier, we want to screw these in, but don't tighten them, because we want to tighten all sides equally and individually once we have all of these 4 screws kind of in there by a fair amount. All right, so I think I'm close to tightening. So I'm going to take one of these corners, tighten that, go to the other corner, tighten that, go to another corner, tighten that. And again, I want to do this because I want to put equal pressure across the CPU so nothing bends. And there you go, that is the CPU cooler, if you want to go water cooled, installed. So with that installed, all you got to do from here is just go ahead and hook up the cables for the water cooler to your motherboard, which I'll go ahead and quickly show you how to do with this iCUE link system. But once that's done, then we can finish out with the graphics card. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and show how I'm gonna go ahead and wire up the fans and the CPU pump onto the motherboard. Now, again, I'm using this special iCUE AIO, so it's gonna be a little bit different, but more or less the steps are gonna be the same. So with iCUE, it's pretty awesome because the link system means you just have to worry about a single cable going from the fans and the pump into this controller right here. So this is the first cable I'm gonna go ahead and plug into right here. There we go, we're gonna click that in. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and thread this into the back of the PC case somewhere. I'll deal with it later. And then right here on the bottom of the actual pump, you may not be able to see it that well, but let's go ahead and plug in the cable for that. So let's take one of these. All right, that is in. I'll go ahead and thread this through the PC case. So we've got our pump cable and our CPU fans cable going through the back of the PC case. So let's go ahead and move back around here. Flip this back around for you guys. Right here's our controller. So let's plug one of these cables into here and plug the other one into another cable right here. That is pretty easy. And if we flip the controller over, we have the power, a USB 2.0 header for control, and an additional header for the fans. So if we look here with what came with our iCUE system for the AIO, here's cable number 1. This is a power cable, and it looks like we'll need a 3-pin PCIe power cable. So if we look over here, we will actually need one of these for our power supply. And fortunately, again, the coolness of this Shift series power supply is I can just go ahead and plug this into any PCIe power cable here onto the back of the unit. And there you go, we've got power. So we'll plug one of these into here like that. And then here is the power cable that'll go into the rear of the controller. Make sure that's fully inserted, just like that. Now we're also given a USB 2.0 header and another cable for that. We'll go ahead and plug this in. There we go. And we'll plug this other end into a USB 2.0 header on the motherboard, which I'll quickly show you what that looks like. So if we bring this around and bring a cable through here, this is going to go into one of these ports down here. It doesn't matter which one. And if you're wondering where I found this, once again, I referred to the motherboard manual. I looked at the motherboard map and it showed me where the USB 2.0 header is on this board. But no matter the brand, it's gonna be down here in the middle, and this will only go in one way like that. So we are almost done with our iCUE controller here. There's one more connector we're gonna go ahead and untangle. And this should look familiar to you guys because on the other end is a 3-pin fan header. So this is what's going to partially control the speed of the fans here for the connector. So this is gonna go in this little slot right here. See, this is gonna go just like that. And we'll plug this other end into any fan header we want here. Like what I was saying earlier, I wanna save one of these CPU fan headers here at the top of the motherboard, if you could see it, for the CPU cooler. I'll show you here in B-roll if you can't quite see it. But now I'll go ahead and plug in this into where it's the CPU fan, because this is ultimately for the CPU cooler, which is cooling off our CPU. There we go. So iCUE Link made this pretty simple and pretty quick. If you're to choose another AIO and have a lot of cables for the ARGB and fan headers, and you may have to daisy chain them, it could come with its own proprietary controller, but iCUE Link made that whole system actually pretty easy. So with that taken care of now, I want to show you quickly how to install any additional case fans you want into this PC case and show you how it looks. But other than that, we're just about ready to put in the graphics card. Okay, so as promised, I was going to show you guys how to install case fans into whatever PC case you choose. And I've got 3 different types right here. This is by far the most common one. It's just a standard case fan that just hooks up with a standard 4-pin fan header that can go into any 4-pin port here on the motherboard that says sysfan. So that's short for system fan. These are really easy. You can't mess them up, but as you can see, they can sometimes come with 2 ends, one end to plug into your motherboard or one end to plug into another fan with the same fan header. So you can daisy chain these fans. That way you don't have a bunch of fans connecting to different ports on the motherboard. It can just be all connected into a singular port. So that's a non-RGB fan. An ARGB fan, basically the same thing. As you can see, you're still given the same 4-pin fan header as the last fan. This actually controls the fan speed, but you're also given one of these. This is a 3-pin ARGB header. This allows you to control the RGB on the case fan from the motherboard, or in certain cases, there's actually an RGB and fan controller that comes on the back of the PC case, where you can just plug this into that, and then all the fans from that can then plug into the motherboard with a singular connector. But once again, for ARGB fans, these come in 2 cables, case fan and the ARGB fan. But there's a third, and that's what we're gonna be installing today, and that's these special Corsair iCUE supported case fans. And these are even different. So these are pretty interesting. They all hook up with a singular cable, kind of like this, or in the case of these fans, they can actually hook together. Let me see if I can quickly demonstrate this. So as you can see right here, just to show this as a proof of concept, I plug this into there, I put this into there, and I think I go ahead and just put the 2 fans together kind of like this. And there we go. So these are special case fans. They're ones that just don't use regular connectors like what I just discussed. These use their own proprietary connectors, but these Corsair iCUE fans are probably the most intricate and best looking solution I've seen for additional case fans. It's really similar to what you've already seen with the AIO that we installed previously and the case fans that are already in this case, but I'm gonna go ahead, put these at the bottom of the PC case, screw them in, show how to plug them into the motherboard. It's pretty self-explanatory. So again, for today's case fan installation tutorial, I'm gonna put these in a bit of an unconventional spot down there, but typically where you'd want to install these, if your case didn't already come with some, are gonna be here in the front where you can just go ahead and screw in directly. You also have a port right here in the back, which will actually take an additional fan, slap one right in like that. And you also have some on the top, and in some cases, some at the bottom at a certain angle. But to go ahead and install these fans into the case the way I want to, just to really max out this system in terms of case fans, because there's gonna be quite a bit. So change of plans. I will put these down here at some point, but actually I'm just gonna go ahead and install a case fan here at the back just to show you guys how to do it. So I'm gonna go ahead and first route the cable for this into the PC case. So if we had a regular fan like this, I just thread this into where the CPU cables are coming out of the PC case. But since we're using these special Corsair iCUE Link fans, what's really cool about these is I can just go ahead and plug one end here, and then plug the other end here into the top of the AIO, which is already in the PC case, which is pretty convenient, like that. So I've already got this case fan already hooked up, which is really neat. I'm actually gonna see if I can flip this around. There we go. And then I'm gonna take the supplied case screws that came with the fan for this. Always use the supplied screws. There also could be some that come with your PC case. Doesn't matter which one you go with. I'm gonna go ahead and start screwing this in. So as you can see, I'm just plainly screwing in the 4 screws on this, but like what I do with the motherboard, I don't screw in all the screws completely. I just make sure they make contact with the case fan frame. Then I fully tighten, fully tighten, fully tighten, fully tighten, and there you go. And now we're on to my favorite part of the video, the graphics card. And for this PC, or really any PC you build, you can go with NVIDIA, you can go with AMD, you can even go with Intel. But for this tutorial specifically, I decided to opt to use the 12-volt power cable here, which is just an NVIDIA thing. So we're going with the NVIDIA GPU, although you're totally welcome to go with AMD or Intel. Just remember, if you want to use those GPUs, you'll need a standard PCIe power cable, which will come with every power supply you buy, whether it's modular or fully modular or non-modular, it'll come with one of these. Really, at that point, you're only constricted by your choice of power supply, which if you read right here, we've got a 1000 watt power supply, so that's gonna be plenty for the 5080. But if you went with something smaller like a 9070 XT, you'd need, I think, an 850 or 750. Or if you went with a B580, 650 probably is all you need for one of these, like that inexpensive Corsair CX 650 we were just looking at earlier. So here's our 5080. And again, I want to stress, you don't need a 5080 for your first gaming PC. You could even get a 5070, but even the 5070 is kind of washed. You probably want, like I showed you, a 9070 or 9070 XT, or anything cheaper like that, a B580. Because a 5080 for gaming is pretty overkill. But this really is one of my favorite parts in building a PC, is unboxing the graphics card. Looks like Asus has this cool little, it's not square, it's got like angled corners right here. Oh, that's pretty. Ooh, nice. And I think we can just open this up like it's a showcase. Ooh, I think, nope, we just do this, just shake it out. And there we go. And there, right there is our 5080. But before I show you that, with any of these NVIDIA graphics cards, we are given an adapter. If you wanted to use, again, a regular PCIe power cable with any of these, it'll just go into a 12 volt. But we've already got the 12 volt power cable right there and ready for our graphics card, so we don't need it. But go ahead, take out the most expensive part of your PC build, which is your graphics card. Oh my goodness. These graphics cards are getting way too big, man. There we go. But one thing you'll notice immediately with some of these graphics cards is that there's still quite a bit of plastic wrapping all over it. So I'm gonna need to take a moment and take off all of this real quick. Okay, so I've got the GPU fully de-plasticed because you want to remove any of that plastic because it could melt onto the graphics card. Just make sure you get everything. But first things first, go ahead and remove the PCI Express cover. And then something you might want to do, depending on your case, is go ahead and start removing these plastic stoppers for the video connectors here found on your graphics card. These could get in the way of inserting your graphics card into the PC case. And we've got plenty of connectors here found on this 5080 Tough model, which, by the way, doesn't matter which one you go with, HDMI or DisplayPort, it's gonna work. Take this thing, flip it over, let's put it in the case, and this should be pretty straightforward. Although, before you put it in, almost forgot, you gotta go ahead and make room for it here on the PCI Express slots. So if we were to kind of eyeball this in, it's gonna be a 3-slot card, so it's gonna take up, or 2-slot, it's gonna take up these 2 slots right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a screwdriver, unscrew this, and unscrew that. All right, so we've got 2 Express slots now open for our 5080. Bring this around, line it up with the topmost PCI Express slot. Okay, just kind of get it in there a little bit. May need to play around. Okay, that's basically gonna go in. So I've got it fully inserted, but to make sure it's all the way in, I'm gonna give it a firm press and you should be able to hear a click. Okay, that's more like a thud, but it is in there now. And by the way, with most PC cases, including the 4000D, we've actually got a little GPU sag bracket thing right here that we'll mess with a little bit later. But for now, we'll go ahead and screw this back into the PC case. All right, we've got that screwed in. And like I said earlier, we've got our 12 volt power cable ready for our graphics card. Again, if you're using AMD or Intel, this will just be 2 or 3 PCIe power cables sticking out, same deal. But with this 12 volt power cable, you definitely want to make sure that it's not only all the way in there, but that there's no tension riding on it. So let's see, I think I may need to flip this cable around because you can see there's this little top part here on the connector that's gonna go right there. But above that, there is this latch right here. So this will only go in one way. Make sure you fully insert it. It's gotta be all the way in there. The latch is in, I'm giving it a few extra presses. That is definitely in there. And while the PC may look a bit bare bones, a bit broken down, you are ready to actually clean this all up and go ahead and boot up and turn on your PC for the first time, because at this point, you're finished building. Now again, you're welcome to add on any fans, which I could probably cover in this video, but otherwise, this is a complete PC and it's ready to be turned on. So go ahead and catch up with us on part 3, where we perform first boot and then install Windows on this PC for the first time.